Welcome to episode 16.
What's it called?
COVID and the Restless. COVID and the Restless.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyways,
First topic.
dog whistling. I just learned this term.
I'm surprised. But should lead to an interesting topic. So recently there's been a little brouhaha in la belle province, Québec, once again. So a writer for, I believe it's the Journal de Montréal, he's a writer who's known for quote unquote dog whistling, where he says something that he knows can mean something else to others without necessarily crossing the lines of being explicit. You could think of times in the 60s where Nixon and I think Reagan was in the 70s, right? Nixon would say like a war on drugs basically meant like a war on blacks and liberals and weed smokers and so on. That's what dog whistling essentially is. But Ray-Jean Tremblay recently wrote an article saying that, to paraphrase, it was written in French.
Who is Ray-Jean Tremblay?
He is a writer from Quebec who tends to have right-wing leanings in his political views.
Writer of what?
He writes on sports. He writes on other topics also. And he said that the Canadians are doing so good right now that if you wanted, you could put a team of 20 Fang Wongs hyphen with the way the KHL, if the KHL's plans go according to plan in 20 years. No, you know what? Let's pull it up. It's worthy of it.
This is going somewhere.
It is. Where is the translation? Going to John Lou. Taking a bit of time, but it's all worth it.
All this just equals rendering minutes.
Does.
That's what I think of.
That's fair. Well, I'll just go off my head then.
Right.
So basically, the French writer said that the Canadians are playing so well that if, according to the KHL's plans, in 20 years, the Canadians are playing so well that if they ice an entire team of Chinese players named Fang Wang, they would still find a way to win. Then he said in hyphen, he said bracket, if the KHL's plan, which is the Continental Hockey League in Russia, goes according to plan, then in 20 years we will have an NHL with a bunch of players named Fang Wang, is what he said roughly.
There you go.
Found it? Is it translated here also?
I don't know.
Okay. So, donc, tout va bien puisque pourvu qu'on gagne, le CH pourrait faire jouer 20 Chinois et ce serait parfait. So everything is going so good that the Canadians can win, even if they ice 20 Chinese skaters. 20 Chinese skaters, they would still be a perfect team because things are going so well. Next statement. Remarquez que si la KHL réussit à convaincre les Chinois de se mettre au hockey, ça se peut qu'on se retrouve avec 20 Fang Wang dans 20 années. So keep in mind, if the KHL succeeds at convincing the Chinese to get into hockey, it's possible that we could have 20 Fang Wangs in 20 years, is what he said. So, a honorable and respected writer in the Montreal community named John Liu took to Twitter and responded to that, and by saying, "Why wait 20 years? I can school you now," was his comment. And that was like a benign swipe in hindsight at what that guy said, but I think it was the little slice that allowed other people of Asian descent to come in beneath John Liu's comments and express how they felt as if this was dog whistling and how it made them feel. So that's when I brought it to the fiance, because I wanted her input on all of it and how she feels as somebody who could speak firsthand to the issue. So
I'll repeat what I said.
Yes.
I'll repeat what I said yesterday, which is, one, I don't think that writers should ever get canceled, because regardless of whether or not you agree with what they say or with whatever they say is correct or incorrect, I think that writing is a form of artistry and you shouldn't restrict somebody's art in the same way that comedians shouldn't be told what jokes they can or can't say because it's their joke. It's how they view the world. It's their interpretation of it. And canceling somebody for their opinion is no good. Like, it doesn't actually do anything. Even when you just cancel people for saying the wrong thing, like, rather than cancel them, why don't you just talk to them about it? Why don't you figure out where they're coming from? Why don't you figure out if they were malicious in their intent? If they just were ignorant, why don't you educate them? And maybe they'll make a different decision next time in their writing. So I don't think that this person should be canceled, as you're expressing people on Twitter are saying, or people in general.
There's a petition that John Liu started, or not started, he wrote into the newspaper saying he isn't, this person should be able to write these things and the article should be taken down. And then what they did was they removed the reference to Fang Wang and just kept it as 20 Chinese players.
If he would have just written that from the start, just writing Chinese players and not writing what can be perceived as a slur to the Asian community, because outside of the Asian community, maybe that's just like, I do it, you do it. We use a blanket name that's very common to a certain group of people to refer to that group of people.
Karens is a very popular term
Becky's,
right now.
Jamal's, Bob's, John Doe's.
In my article last week talking about the generic guy from Florida, Billy, Jeanette from Québec.
Everybody uses them.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that that's necessarily wrong, but I think that maybe what's flaring or inflaming or enraging John Liu to act out is that, given the context of what's happening in the world today, you could have said something else. You could have just said Chinese players, which is what you already amended it, what you ended up amending it to. So what's the difference? For the culture, for the Asian community who's reading what you have to say, for the French Canadian Asian community who's, probably able to empathize with you, because from what I understand, there are translation issues when you go from like French into English. Something gets lost in translation.
French is a very descriptive and direct language, like saying "et la noir là-bas" would be like the black there. But in English, that sounds so harsh because we tend to PC our language to the point where we might even become too removed from literal use of language because we're afraid of feelings. And in French, the translation, like, they don't write with that cautiousness. So when it's translated, it can come across as very abrasive, especially if you know the person has certain leanings that would lead you to believe they are dog whistling you with those. So with that being said, I also took it in context of knowing that, one, John Liu is very adept and he understands the nuances of that market. He also is a longtime hockey player, so he also knows that before there were colored people in hockey, it was an issue of just not the ethnicity, but the nationality, where they would have things like those players, those Euro players, they have too much Swedish and not enough Finnish, because the Finnish would always trend towards the North American style of play, which garnered a lot of respect from the North American players. But the other European players who didn't play like that, sometimes they wouldn't be spoken to on the ice properly. They were segregated with names also. So I do understand and appreciate, as a person of color as well, understanding the sentiment of feeling like you could be dog whistled. But then when I take this article into context and I try to put myself into its shoes, I ask, like, if they said in 20 years that the league will be full of Jamals and Tyrones, I'd be like, damn right. And I think it's kind of like, for me, another, like, I always think of a positive stereotype that Asians have is like, you guys are thought of as smart, whereas we might be thought of as lazy. But if it's a positive stereotype, it could be played off as good. I'm not even sure if this blends into that.
I personally don't think that using stereotypes in writing it's a risk that you take for a style. So this is what I was talking about yesterday, which is like, every writer writes for a purpose. If it's whatever your purpose is, you'll go ahead and fulfill it. If you're writing for accuracy, then I don't think that his statement is completely accurate if he said Chinese players as was amended to, then that would be accurate because that's exactly what they are, Chinese players. If it's already known in the community, in the hockey community, that the Chinese team or Chinese players have not, the Chinese team that they've been trying to put together in China is not very good, then then people can understand within that context, knowing that Chinese players are historically bad. When someone says that colloquially in conversation, no one's going to be pissed off about that. But when you say, hey, those Chang Chongs suck, like that's different because you're already doing two things. You're saying Chinese players suck, which is true. Too bad, so sad. But then you're adding this other layer that's unnecessary to me in writing. So he just has to decide what his purpose is. Is his purpose to be accurate? Does he want to just speak about, like, because the article is about how good the Habs are doing, that they could take shitty players like Chinese players and they could all win because the Habs are doing so great. Do you need to call them Fang Chongs? Fang Wongs? No, you could just call them Chinese players. But if your purpose is to rile people up and get people interested, if you're doing that as a stylistic choice to be engaging, then that's at your risk. You risk this. You risk which every person runs the risk of doing when they speak freely from their own opinion, is that they risk alienating a group of people, hurting people, offending people, whatever it is. In this situation, personally, I'm not offended, but even though I'm Asian, that doesn't really speak for the Asians in the hockey community who might experience discrimination, who feel a different way. So I personally can't speak to that situation because I'm not that. And I think that that's a different context that also needs to be respected because, as you said, there's many Asians who play hockey who experienced being called stuff like that, being discriminated against, and maybe not even being bad. Like maybe they were good hockey players. Like you go to Vancouver and there's tons of Asians who play hockey and they're good. Like they're legit.
Maybe it comes across in a different way because if they see it as he's talking about ethnicity versus nationality, that nuance could be also misconstrued.
That's true. That's true as well. And that's why it's not accurate. Yeah. Because you're saying Fang Shongs. Or Fang Wongs. That's what most people who are discriminated against all Asians, regardless of whether they know which Asian they are or not, will use that term. And you're not even Chinese. Like people will call people of Asian descent whatever because they look Chinese, but we're not all Chinese. And they'll use terms like that to name Asians, even though those are primarily derogatory terms for Chinese people, but we're not even Chinese. So there's a lot of layers of that where if he just said Chinese.
I was thinking about it now in another context. Now, if Fang Wong is an actual real Chinese player name, that'd be a different story. That might
completely different.
Hold on, but I was thinking if they were to reverse it and said in 20 years we'd have a bunch of Anson Carters who played on the first line with the Canucks for a while, and he was he was like probably the first all black hockey player who was regarded for his skills, not just the ability to fight, but he was like a legit top six forward. Now, if he would have said like we could have a bunch of Anson Carters, who you can't have a team of all Anson Carters because you won't win necessarily. But if he said that, would it be offensive? Just asking hypothetically. I'm not sure if it is or if it isn't. I'm wondering how you would think of it.
Anson Carter is all 100% black?
Yeah. He's Bajan.
I don't know if I can say that because I'm not black, so I don't know.
Like, I would think I think it would be an accurate statement that would rile people who look to racialize discussions.
Yes, but the thing is, many people look to racialize discussions. So even in this, it doesn't matter what you do these days. Everything is racialized. Everything. The way you walk, the way you eat, the way you look at people, the way you talk, your accent, where you're born, everything's racialized. But in that situation, I'd say that's more accurate because you actually have a player to... It's like saying having a bunch of Gretzky's. It's the same shit.
Yeah.
You're using a player in the hockey community that's known for whatever skill they're known for. Therefore, you can compare more accurately to say like, yeah, we want a bunch of Anson Carters because he's X, Y, Z. He plays like this, this, and this. Same way you would say Gretzky. Same way you would say Suzuki's.
Yeah.
So I would rather he use that, like use a shitty player or a player that you know is kind of going downhill that everybody knows is like not the best hockey player anymore, a bunch of those, and you'll get the same effect, but you won't piss off a group of people, possibly. Two, you're probably a little more accurate because you actually have a hockey acumen to not just saying they're shitty. You actually have a player to say they can do this, they can do this, they can't do this, they can't do this. Using a real player's name would be slightly more accurate to me.
I'd like to revise my prior stance on my overall opinion on this. I still stand by, as I'm sure you do, his right to write whatever he wants, but I think as a seasoned journalist, he's capable to know his penmanship is refined enough where he knows his intent without question. And I wrote to John Liu in response to Twitter, but I realized since my stuff are private, he probably wouldn't see it. I asked him, would this be, I asked as a person of color, sincerely asking, would it be equally offensive if he wrote a bunch of 20 players from Israel named Ari Goldberg? Would it be equally offensive? And I sincerely think that's a fair question, because I think it's because of the times that there's a heightened sense of unacceptability for that.
It's a fair question, but John Liu's not the person to ask.
Fair. That's true.
So I'm sure he could say maybe. And the thing is about writing is that context really is everything. Mm-hmm. Because if you're trying to understand, if you're trying to get the message, if you're trying to really understand what the writer is writing and look for their intent and purpose, because as a reader, you can never really know unless that person clearly states it. But when you read a piece of writing, when someone writes something and puts it into the world, it's open to interpretation. So there's no right or wrong unless verified by the writer, and you don't always get that, right? So with this guy, I think that he's within his right to write how he wants. Mm-hmm. That's first and foremost for everyone. But on the other side of that, I also think that writing is very powerful. And I think that especially being a public writer, I personally feel like those writers have a responsibility because they have so much they can change and move with their writing, that there's a certain responsibility, just like every celebrity, just like all the, celebrities and pop stars who are like, I'm not a role model.
A certain amount of accountability.
You have a certain amount of responsibility and accountability to be accurate, to make sure that you can be as inclusive with your intent, not necessarily of all the people, but making sure that your intent is mindful of the context in which you write. And I think that that's what also makes good writing.
And I think with that in mind, it's why those who know him well enough are ready to indict him, because they don't need to go through the steps of A to Z. They know the story with him. That I think that plays into it as well with that writer. Because if it was a new writer who wrote that and said, my apologies, I'll just change that, I think there might have been a tolerance for it. But with this guy, it's like, nah, not you. You've been doing this forever.
The context in which he's writing, and I get that he's well known, and I don't even think that if it was a new writer that they would get the same would get tolerance. I think right now there's no tolerance. Whether you're new, people don't really care about the reputation of the writer, especially like for me, I don't know his reputation. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's lots of people who just heard it, because that's what happens. People hear things through social media. They don't do their research on who's writing, what the context is. Like reading has context too. And then all of a sudden everybody's upset about something. Mm-hmm. So I think that right now, because there's so much like the hate crimes against the Asian community, and there's lots of seemingly anti-Asian sentiment because of all of the actions that are happening in the news. I think that is something that maybe John Liu felt like he had accountability as a public Asian figure to stand up for, even if it didn't maybe it's not as hurtful as he maybe people are perceiving it to be to John Liu, but maybe he's sitting there going, you know what? I could let this go, but there's a group of people whose voices probably aren't heard. You don't hear a lot about Asian hockey players, maybe apart from the Chinese players being really bad. And so maybe he thought that given the times especially, that it was important for him to stick up for maybe like the Fang Shang or Fang Wang in like some like the Sticks of Ontario, who plays hockey with a bunch of white people and gets made fun of all the time. Maybe he thought that, let me just do this one thing for them that I can do.
Fair.
As my responsibility and accountability as a public Asian figure in the hockey community. Fair. Who's also well respected,
yes.
as I believe. So
I can appreciate all of it. I can understand any motivations that could lead one to feel a need to address a stereotype that you feel as if is damaging, whether accurate or not. I can appreciate the need to feel like if you have the biggest voice to use it on that platform. I sincerely was just engaged by this, and I think for most things that I am engaged by, I tend to come across as adversarial to both sides, when in every case I'm more so curious about both sides, if that makes sense. But this one was very interesting because it takes place smack dab in my home province, and it has nothing to do with me for once. Like, I'm not really a part of the equation in the discourse. So it was very interesting because I could understand both sides of the writing and the displeasure with the writing, sincerely. But as I said, I think it's worth keeping in mind that his character, because his character is what kind of directs his writing. So I'd say it's like you could hate somebody for this one thing that they said or this one thing that they said, and if argued at just that one stance, they can always dismiss it because it's like it's not enough to indict. But in these cases, you have to kind of take the person as a collective, not just by that one piece. And I think I don't read enough French writing to care about that guy, to know about that guy, whereas John probably is well versed in this man's habits. I got away from the province and I don't really go back to read French news. If anything, I listen to John Liu. I've spent a lot of my life hearing John Liu, if anything, which is real. For real.
John Liu's a good dude.
Indeed. Solid.
What is that?
It's for the waves, nigga.
Oh, God.
Wave Trois. Wave 3. It's here. It's here. Well, it's not here. It's coming.
There's been it's just been one big tidal wave. If you think about it, if you look at the spike in the cases, that only came in the second wave, which means that was the first wave. Like, it went like this. And then now it's going like this, and it's going to go again. Like, they're not waves. We've just always had COVID. And the reason why it looks like a wave is because there's no accurate tracing. There's no accuracy in vaccines. There's no accurate in tracking. How are you even supposed to know there is a wave or not a wave, or that there was never a wave? Because in the first wave, there wasn't a lot of testing. There wasn't a lot of contact tracing. There weren't a lot of measures in place. There was barely anything. So you could say, oh, it's kind of the first wave. But no, I bet you there were just tons of people who had COVID and didn't know. And then once the second wave came in, it's because a bunch of people had gotten COVID, and then now everybody's scared and getting tested.
Possible. Very, very plausible. I will agree that we should not be so certain as to what wave we are on. If we are on an ocean that is just
act right. That's it. Just take care of yourself.
Indeed.
Instead of I've
get that vitamin D and zinc.
I've stopped looking at the news. I don't care how many cases there are per day. I really don't, because it doesn't matter. If the cases are 1,000 today and 900 tomorrow, there's no difference in my life.
That's a good point.
So until there are actual changes in my life, I'm not going to look at the news in terms of how many cases there are, how things are doing, because all it does is it just makes me depressed. more than I already am.
Main Street doesn't care what's happening on Wall Street until it affects Main Street.
I have no idea.
It's a financial thing. Like the Wall Street banker can say, "Oh, everything's great," but the Main Street might not feel the exact same, and vice versa.
Which one am I?
Main Street.
Okay.
You're on the pavement. You're living the day to day, whereas the Wall Street banker's like, "Oh, they're fine."
I don't know anybody who's saying that right now. I think anybody who's saying that is lying. Mm-hmm. I think everybody's severely affected by the pandemic one way or another, whether it's subconscious or unconscious, whether it's physical or mental. Everybody is just getting a run for their money with this shit because it affects everyone.
I agree wholeheartedly. They're saying that with these variants coming in, whatever progress that we've made, consider we're gone if we even think about stopping this lockdown, which it's like, do you have any good options? Do we have any good options? So we could stay inside of our houses and go loony, or we could go outside of our houses and have our insides turn loony. Take your pick.
I don't know what's worse. I really don't know what's worse.
I know.
It's a real toss up. If someone was like, "You want to get COVID?" I'd be like,
"Can I stay away from people over the age of 70 for a good 6 months?"
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Because
I can deal with that.
I don't know. To anybody who's been watching these podcasts over the past 15 episodes, first of all, you're special people, and we're thankful for you because we probably know you personally. So, love you.
Thank you.
But it's clear that I always try to err on the side of, okay, so what's the truth here? What's the answer? As much as I can get to that within my own biases that are still omnipresent. And truth is, the people dying, over the vast majority of them are 80 and up and or in long-term care homes. The people who get it, the vast majority of them recover. Professional athletes who their bodies are their most important asset, like Tina Turner's legs. She had those things insured for $1 million each. Random fact.
That I know, but odd to say it right now.
Hey, pops in. They're willing to play the season where it's like, if you have COVID, you just sit down for a bit and then you come back when you're done with it. When do we start having like some common sense, like, but wait a second, is COVID really that bad for us? And that sounds ridiculous to say because we all know people have lost somebody. I've watched funerals from COVID deaths, and I know that it affects people, and there's no doubt about it, and it's continuing to affect people. There are people who have died, and those people mean something to the people that they left. But if we're looking at this from a mathematical perspective and a holistic approach to the overall health of the entire globe, speaking more specifically in Canada, are we willing to jeopardize the young minds by rotting them to save the few who we can now at least vaccinate or at least keep them safe from the general public? When does it become a question as to what is the best course of action for all of us?
It's like that Anthony Mackie movie.
Yeah. I've been saying this is Thanos. COVID is Thanos.
I've been saying. You just said it the other day.
Nah. Maybe I've just been saying it out loud to you.
No, that's you. That the day you realized it, you were like, oh, "Wow, COVID really is Thanos."
That might have been me outwardly, vocally confirming my own internal thoughts.
Please.
Just saying.
Whatever.
There's a lot that goes on in here.
I don't want to know. Anyways, I just think that lockdowns don't work.
Yeah.
I don't think they work. Not necessarily in terms of reducing risk. I think obviously if you stay home, you reduce your risk of contact and contracting the virus as well as spreading it. So I agree with that. But having been one of the good ones who actually does stay at home, doesn't go out, doesn't do fuck all, it's not good for your health in any way.
No, man. No, dog.
So what do you want people to do? Do you want them to be locked down and then just like suicides have been on the rise? Do you want them to be locked down? Families have been driven apart. Couples have been driven apart. People have grown to learn what anxiety is, to learn what depression is. Those who felt like they would never get it, never feel it, or don't know what it is, don't think it's real. It's all real, and it's all being caused by being forced to stay at home, either by yourself because you've decided to comply, or because of the consequences of going outside, which can either be fines from your government, because
Quebec.
I know that in in Quebec they're heavy on the fines. My friend who lives in Brussels, they are super heavy. Like, she went for a walk around the block just with her kid because her kid was born just before COVID, and just needed, some air, 5 minutes to walk around the block. And the police asked her, what is she doing? That's scary. To feel scared that you can't go outside, not because you did anything wrong, but because the police are going to get you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many people can empathize.
This is a special time. And I think small pockets of big discussions are going to lead to a change in state of how we're handling this. Because at this point, we've been following our leaders, I won't say blindly, but hopefully and consistently.
Yeah.
But we're not getting any results that are changing the states of our lives. And we've been complying willingly, not forcefully, willingly. And after a while, the loonies on the edges of each spectrum are always going to act loony. But once they start gathering people to their movements and they start becoming a plurality, a majority of the discourse, there's a certain amount of this that cannot be sustained, and people will be back outside. It's just like, if you look at Florida.
Florida gives no fucks.
Florida and Georgia, COVID, nah, it's all good. And that's it. And if we're being real about it, they've been having COVID also, but at least they look like they're having a good time.
That's the truth.
That's just the facts.
At this point, that's the truth. And just open stuff up, please. because take care of the people who need to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. The elderly, the at-risk, the frontline workers. And I completely understand. I can't empathize with the frontline workers. I can't, because I can't even imagine what it's like working in a hospital for the last year. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine how it's been like working in long-term home care, interacting with the elderly. I can't imagine being an elderly person in long-term home care who's like, well, does this speed up my number? Thinking that you could die quicker because of COVID, or learning that a long-term care facility had an outbreak and the whole fucking thing is dead. I can't imagine those things. So that's not to say that my situation is worse than theirs or comparing them in any way. That's just saying that what we've been doing for the last year isn't working. So something's got to give. And I don't know what it is, but I just know that it's definitely not staying inside.
Why? I'm on the same page as you, man. Same thing for me, man. Mm-hmm. It's not good. You just got to get out sometimes. I miss the hockey. Well, not watching, but playing. I miss the playing.
I miss just being outside and not having to just be outside, outdoors.
Yeah.
There's a difference between outdoors and out of your home doing other things. There's only so much I can do walking in a 5-block radius of my house.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
It literally doesn't look different from... It's only very, very partially different.
Valentine's Day à la Quarantaine. So...
What would you like to talk about? This is what you proposed?
Well, normally we would make something special. We barbecued steaks before.
We didn't do that last year.
No, but I'm saying we normally do something. Go out and eat. We got bueno last year, I believe, right?
We made steaks last year.
Still made steaks last year. Well, I'm saying today. We go pick them fresh off the racks. It's our outing. As I said, can't really get a special meal these days with quarantine. I would have liked to have gone to a restaurant. Would have been nice, but yeah, we're still on lockdown.
I would have liked to go somewhere.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, maybe we can go somewhere for the weekend because it's a long weekend too with Family Day. And I was like, well, where would we go? Or where would we go to that's open? Because even like taking a drive somewhere to stay in a hotel, all the hotels are like strict rules. Like you can't do anything, whatever. Some aren't even open. Most of the sites to see that are within driving distance are closed. So unless you have a cabin by the lake, like so many Ontarians seem to have, like where are you gonna go?
Nowhere.
What are you gonna do?
Casa house. Chai tea. Yeah, there isn't really anywhere to go. There are avenues for surprises. Potentially.
Like what surprises?
There are avenues.
That's
what was that for?
The most authentic face that I can give to that.
There are avenues. There are avenues for many things to potentiate.
It's such a good weekend, though. It's Lunar New Year, it's Valentine's, and it's also Family Day. Which makes it.
What day is it in here?
Right?
It's just day.
Yeah, it's supposed to be such a good weekend. Like, if we were able to go out and do stuff, not just we, but like the world,
right now,
there would be so much to celebrate. Like Lunar New Year is bomb. Even though I'm only a very small amount of Chinese, with my family, sometimes we'll like have a dinner and go, okay, this will be our Lunar New Year dinner. Just like no different from any other time. Not as big as Thanksgiving or Christmas, but we'll make an effort to eat like dumplings and noodles because that's good enough for us. And what?
I have things that I miss from Chinese New Year also.
Red envelopes?
Yes. Hey, my employer would always have them waiting on my desk, and I appreciated Chinese New Year, okay?
We would give each other red envelopes too, but we're also poor, so it's like sometimes inside the red envelope is just an IOU. Well, we would normally give envelopes. Like my mom gets a lot from her friends who then give them to me. So like my mom's friends would definitely have red envelope times, and my friends who are like more Asian than I am because I'm only a very small part of the Lunar New Year. I just thought about this the other day. I, as an Asian American with 3 different Asian heritages, have 3 different New Years.
I was just thinking, is Asian New Year, are there people in the Asian Lunar New Year?
Just lunar.
Lunar New Year?
Okay. Lunar New Year.
Is it celebrated primarily by people in Asian countries?
No, because there are lots of countries in Asia and only like 4 or 5 of them celebrate Lunar New Year.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Context. Not the Kung Flu. See, I don't want to be Trumpy.
Kung Flu's kind of funny.
But that's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to be Trumpy.
Yeah, but there's nothing really funny that you can make out of Chinese New Year.
No, but you could be speaking in a way that is funny because it's not accurate, but it can still have a, I don't know.
Asians will just laugh.
Fair. I was wondering if there are people who, like, you know, when it's coming close to like Valentine season, where they like break up with people, like, Lunar New Year coming up.
Yeah,
gotta break up.
100%. 100%. I'm in a group called Subtle Asian Traits on Facebook, and it's awesome. So funny because people make all these, like, I like it because it's a mix of all Asians, including South Asians, including mixed race Asians, but sometimes it's just trolling. Like, it's just like memes that every Asian can relate to, whatever it is. And some of them are like, you know how there are memes that go blank be like?
Mm-hmm.
There's like Lunar New Year be like.
Gotta go, babe.
When the red envelope wasn't full enough. When the red pockets weren't full enough.
Is it that white girl where the red pockets, like, we look, and she's like, that one's good when there's more money in it?
I haven't seen that one. The memes that I see are with Asians in them.
Fair enough.
So they're made by
You know,
Asians.
it's a good meme account randomly, even though I'm not a part of it. Res memes.
You've told me this before.
They are amazing.
I personally
Amazing.
meme accounts. Okay, if we're gonna go off topic slightly, is I like employee tiers because it's all about work and it's memes about how much you hate work.
Okay.
And there was one the other day with a sign that says closed, do not cry in here, and it was a freezer door. And then the meme says when you give your new coworker a tour.
This is it.
There's so many good ones. Anyways, Lunar New Year, lots of food, Valentine's, going out, lots of food, doing stuff all over. Sometimes, like, because Vancouver is really small, you can see all these people doing their, surprise thingies or whatever. Lots of engagements happen on Valentine's outside.
Lunar New Year is interesting in Vancouver, in a place where there are a lot of Asians. It is something that, like, for me, growing up in Montreal, it really... The Asian friends that you had would probably say it to you, and before Facebook, you would never see it.
Yeah. Well, because like, if you're not... It's not like something that everyone's like, you have to do Lunar New Year. It's like, it's very obviously, it's like an Asian thing. However, a lot of Asians, like people who, I should say Asians and Asian Americans who are like really authentic, because I'm not. I'm really not. They totally welcome people to their Lunar New Year dinners and stuff like that. So, but it is something that like shuts down China. You can't do business over Lunar New Year. It's closed. The factories are closed. Everything's closed. Our clients.
The air must be so clear.
It's clear right now because of COVID.
Clearer. They still producing.
Clearer, true. But Lunar New Year, so much good food, and then Family Day, where you get to like. I never do anything on Family Day because I forget.
I enjoy the day off.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I get the day off, so that's good enough for me. But I'm sure I'm gonna eat something on that day. I'm sure I'm gonna go out and enjoy my day off.
Yeah.
None of which can be done this weekend.
Government stealing your life. Not laugh, but your life.
Yeah.
Life.
What does this mean? Betwinks.
Betwinks.
That's not even a word.
That's how I spell it. Well, that's how I say it. So I spelled it how I say it. In betwinks.
It's betwixt.
For you.
In the dictionary.
No, this is just me making up something. Me and my friends say that.
Betwinks?
Yeah. In betwinks.
Okay.
Betwinks. See? In betwinks. The monotony.
Whatever.
Bingy. C'est bon, man. C'est bon. So...
I don't know why I do this podcast. Honestly, I don't know why.
Reddit is stock board checking. See what it is there?
Yeah.
I know.
Gosh. Let's just talk about what happened with GME Gamestop.
So, short selling is when people, it's like the inverse of buying real stocks. Just give you a background as to what happened with GameStop, their stock. Short selling is where you bet something is going to drop in value. So you buy it at its current value, saying that you expect it to lose value, and then you can sell it at its lost value at the same value. I don't know exactly the finite process of it. Sorry.
I'm trying to listen. I'm
It didn't make a lot of sense, but basically they're betting on a stock to fail, and when that happens, they make money. Now, remember when Donald Trump had that party or what are those things called? Where you
rally?
Yeah, rally. He was having a rally, okay, and he was selling tickets, and all those kids on Reddit or whatever, they all joined together and decided to buy all the tickets and not actually have people attend, so he could have an empty background. And they're like, and everybody, like all the old people, like, oh my God, Trump got screwed over. And all the kids are like, yeah, we did that. So I think it's like a coming to age of Gen Z, where they're realizing.
Was that the K-pop thing?
Yeah, where the Gen Z
Shout out to
is
the BTS fans.
There you go. Where Gen Z is realizing we're old enough, and now we realize how dumb the people are above us. Let's play with them. And so with GameStop, what they did was they got everybody to buy those shares. So the shares kept going up in value. So now the short sellers, to cover their losses, doubled down and bought again, expecting like, okay, this can't keep going on. And then it kept going on, so they kept losing money. So they kept having to double down to make that money back, eventually, hoping that eventually the short selling would occur, because the reality is GameStop is a useless business. Think of it as like Blockbuster when Netflix came out. Netflix knew that it was going to be better than Blockbuster because after a while they realized you're not going to need to go physically get your movie. GameStop physically gives you your games. PlayStation and Xbox just released systems that exclusively are diskless.
GameStop is now competing with Calendar Club, you know, that kiosk where you can buy like calendars and games and like puzzles and physical games.
Yeah. They sell Pokemon cards now. That's their main lick. So this is why they're short sold, and it makes sense to short sell them. But now these kids got a hold of that and sent it through the roof. So that's what happened with GameStop. And what it means for the future of the stock market is kind of actually scary, because it means it's no longer fundamentally tied to fundamentals, which in itself is a perversion of how the stock market should work. But it's like it goes back to what we were saying about COVID. After a while, when the people who are left out of powerful decisions grow too large and they amass their own power naturally, the system's going to get fucked. It's going to get fucked with. And so Canopy Growth Corp just released their quarterly earnings a couple of days ago. And whenever anything that happens with them kind of dictates the entire market, they're like the rising tide for all weed stocks. But another stock called Tilray jumped in over like 100% in value within that same time. They were getting reddited. So they were getting driven up. Now, for me, somebody who pays attention to that side of mischievousness and also pays attention to the stock market, there's room to really become a really overnight rich day trader if you really pay attention. But it's dangerous. It's dangerous for the world at this point to be in stocks, I think, and it's going to get really dangerous. It's going to get really dangerous.
This is what I do. I take a small amount of money, I put it in stocks that have been already vetted for me by my financial advisor. So that's all I care about. I can't be bothered. I can't do the day trading. I can't.
You might end up losing money playing a fool.
Not even that. This is so much stress that I don't need. Like the risk part, I'm not a risky person. Every time I take the Wealth Simple, I go on their website and do a risk assessment. It's always low. And I'm fine with that. I'm more than fine with being low risk, because I got too much on my brain right now. I can't be bothered with also stocks. And you got to pay attention, you know?
Yes,
you got to read, you got to pay attention. You have to be a good interpreter. You have to be good at kind of like almost being one step ahead. You have to be good at, you have to have an analytical mind. You have to be able to sort of piece together things and read between the lines and make calls as to when you should not do something, or a company coming up. Like
what was that?
It makes me want to puke already. Like, it just makes me want to puke. But that's why I don't do it. That's why I don't do it. I just know my limit. I play within it. And my limit is zero risk.
I advise her to invest in Dollarama.
No.
No, I ain't finished. I advise you. What you have bought is another story.
Okay.
I'm not giving your business out.
Oh, okay. I thought you were.
I advised only buying solid stocks. They've gone through their J phase already. They're out the woodworks, and now they're just consolidated growers. The only
thing I would feel comfortable investing in is in tech, because I actually know about those companies. However, I don't have the money to invest in tech. So I might have all the information and the research, and I watch these things, but I don't have the money to invest in the companies that I know are going to hit or do certain things. Like, I'm always in the know about when certain companies are going to be acquired, because in tech, it's so easy to acquire companies when you're in the same market or you have similar products. And I watch those things because it happens so often. And all the tech companies that I am interested in, as soon as they go public, I won't be able to afford their stock. Like, I'm watching. I can almost guarantee the ones that are going to go public because I've been using them for years and they become super popular during the pandemic. And once they go public, because they've all been private, like private startups, I can afford it.
So, two parts to this. As millennials, Bumble going public recently is a good example for us to pay attention to see how a product can grow from its infancy stages to becoming intrinsic in our culture, and seeing how it can become monetized and seeing how it becomes an IPO eventually. We got to see Bumble from seed to plant, and I think that's a good stock to use as an example to pay attention to products that you can see how they will become forever entrenched in our community. And secondly, I was going to say, these companies, once they get to the IPO, that is their finish line, because that's their cash out to what they've built, and then they just maintain it, or they sell off their shares gradually as their own dividend, in a sense, to themselves for creating this and saying that's now the world, it's the public's.
Bumble is a good example of how to scale a product beyond what its initial niche that caused it to be viral, for example, would have been. Like, I've never used Bumble, but in terms of what I know of, that it started as dating, then it went into friends, and then it went into networking. Now, those three things, those are your three types of partnerships you would have in your life. Those are the three things. You have romantic, you have professional, and you have platonic, or you have colloquial, or you have acquaintances. They've covered everything. Yeah. And they have a good onboarding system. So as like part of the class that I used to teach, my students would take all of the apps that they use. We have a section on apps in terms of like how to create launches, how to promote apps, whatever. And Bumble was one of them. And the student in my class took us through, showed us the onboarding, what questions do you have to answer, how do you set up your profile, what is the user experience, all this stuff. And from all that, translating the dating version of that into the other two streams, you basically created a social media app that is based off of connection, not off of profile necessarily. Like, it's the reverse on Facebook and Instagram. It's the reverse transaction than you would have on something like Bumble or any other dating app. So they're using the user experience of a dating app, which is very common, familiar, and attractive to people, and applying it to other things.
Is a beehive the same shape as a hex?
I don't know. Good question. And we're back to the W again.
And the V.
WandaVision.
I got it right. That worked out very well.
Oh my god, I love this show so much. I don't know if it's because I miss going to the movies, or because I miss Marvel, or because everything sucks in quarantine, or because the show is that good. But whatever the recipe is, it's so good.
It's a cluster fucking cornucopia of all of it.
It's such a good show. I'm so impressed with every single episode, and I'm not even high during most of them.
I have never watched something aside from Endgame, probably, since actually after Endgame, because the void that Marvel has left us for an entire year, it's unjust, it's criminal. Not legally, but emotionally, it's criminal, Marvel. But for a 30-minute episode of content, I've never had something spur me to listen to or ingest so much content as a derivative. I watch about 2 to 3 hours worth of WandaVision reactions and Easter eggs.
I do too.
With as much fervor and joy as I do the episode, because the episode is that freaking good.
But also,
it's wild.
I actually like watching these videos for all of the Marvel stuff, because what's interesting about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that it existed already. Yeah. And the movies are derivatives of what already existed. The stories, they're derivative stories off of what already exists. So enthusiasts and like real comic fans, listening to them talk about all these things that they're so excited about, it's so engaging.
Like pastors.
Yeah, and I'm not like super, I was never like super into it. I'm into it. I love it all, but I'm not as into it as I can't have a podcast about it or a YouTube channel about it. I'm just not that, my expertise is not there. But I love listening to people like just pick apart everything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to be like, oh, but this could be this because this relates to this. So it's like listening because I actually love listening to conspiracy theorists, just because it's interesting. I love that show. All of the like perspectives are really interesting, and then you can kind of like gauge for yourself, and all of the opinions help you formulate your own. But in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, everybody's like so excited about speculation.
Special shout out to Bounce Back.
Rand Park. I love Bounce Back. He is giving me life.
Everybody is saying that he needs his own like spin-off where he investigates random shit, and I'm here for it.
Randall Park, I love him. I think he's a great actor. I think he's hilarious as shit. If he had a stand-up special, I'm sure I would watch it, but here's why I don't think he ever will. Because I can see him go on the stage and go, and then walk away, and that's his stand-up, and people would go crazy for it. He go, I'm really not that funny, but if you think I am, like, I can see him doing something like that.
Indeed.
I actually really like all the characters in WandaVision too. Yes. Like the balance of all the characters, all the stories.
Agnes! Is it Agatha?
It's so interesting. And I didn't even, like, honestly, because I'm not I was never like a super fan of comics or the Marvel comics and specifically, I don't know a lot of this stuff. So watching the reactions is almost like watching a new episode of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for me, so that I can go and do more research and like get lost in who's the demon, the devil, Mephisto. All of the connections to this person, I want to know who this is.
Listen, demon, they saw it. Listen, from the first episode when they were in black and white, they said for the children. And now they're saying demon spawn, piece of like, he's involved somehow where he's helping her with the hex in some way, and as a derivative, he gets her two children in some way, like the creation of her two children, that they'll be able to live outside of the hex. Vision obviously can't live outside the hex. That's been established.
Yeah.
Whether Pietro. Let's see if it's really that Pietro, or if he's coming from X-Men as X-Men from Quicksilver. If it's going to bring in Michael Fassbender, if it's going to be Doctor Strange at the end.
Oh my gosh, this is why I love watching all the reactions too, because I would never thought of those things watching WandaVision.
What's even
the crossover with X-Men?
What's crazier?
That'd be crazy.
Is that they fuck with us because they don't adhere to normal time slots. So some weeks it's 27 minutes, some weeks it's 41. So then it's just like, please stand by. It's like, you fuckers.
Oh, but it's so good. They get you every
just go
time.
Straight over to the fucking
they get you
reactions.
every time, and they're so clever because it's not like WandaVision existed in the comics. The show?
Well, I'm not sure.
No, like the story of how she has this hex that she's putting people under.
Yes, it's all been made before.
But like it was in a TV show?
No, but in a comic.
Right. No, I mean like the TV show, the tube and like all that, all those extra bits. You know, like how they just took the base of what the comics had?
They extrapolated and made it into its own interpretation.
That own interpretation part is so good. And it lets
they do a good job.
It makes you curious about what originally was there, and it keeps it like you can tell
using the original suits.
This is why I love The Lord of the Rings and why I love Star Wars, Mandalorian. I love Star Wars, but I love Mandalorian because the people who created them are sincere fans. Yeah. Like Peter Jackson is a sincere fan of Lord of the Rings. It was his privilege to work on that. He didn't give a shit if anybody liked it. He was going to do it how he saw it in his head, and real fans are going to see it the same. That's why there's such a big Lord of the Rings stand for those movies, because they are so much what people envisioned in the books. He did a great job. Same thing with Mandalorian. Jon Favreau, the other guy, every director.
Jon Favreau, I'll always get
Jon Favreau is the bomb. But all of the people who directed, and there were 5 or 6 different directors on The Mandalorian, they are all Star Wars like fans. And the 2 main directors, Jon Favreau and that Steve dude, they are big Star Wars, like every little detail. Like they love Star Wars, and that's how I feel the writers are.
Lucas must be content with it in their hands in some way, even though he
met George Lucas, the directors. Not Jon Favreau, who was already going to do it, but I think his name is Steve. I can't remember. I watched the behind the scenes, but he's like, I went to George Lucas's house, and I thought he didn't like me because he just kind of like dismissed me, and then he called me a week later and said, "You want it? You got it." And he was like, super fanboying over it.
It must be like. During the This Is It training stages with Michael Jackson, how the people dancing it felt with him.
Like
must have been the same.
Like when Patrick Mahomes is playing against Tom Brady.
Yeah.
When you get to do something that you've been a fan of, or you get to meet the person you've been a fan of and be part of the creation of it, it's going to be good because you love it that much. You will be so like adamant about sticking to the lines, sticking to the plot lines, making sure there's integrity, making sure like people check and like, no, this is not crazy. The people who are writing on WandaVision and pulling all these derivatives out of the original comic,
like the costumes, that was perfect.
Yeah. And they do that often.
Yes.
And it's such a
they
clever
do a good job.
It's so clever because they've been able, like, imagine working on that show. You get to create something that's in the 60s, the 50s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Like, you get
Malcolm in the Middle intro was amazing this week.
It took me a little while to get to Malcolm in the Middle because I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge Malcolm in the Middle stan. I watched it sometimes. I definitely watched it, but it wasn't like, oh, Malcolm in the Middle. Like, I watched it when it was on.
Yeah.
So I was like, first I went to the old stuff that was outside of my era. I went to my sister's 90s era, which is like Party of Five, My So-Called Life. I automatically thought of those. And I thought, wait a minute, they're millennials. This is Malcolm in the Middle. And the font is the same.
Francis.
Yep, everything was the same. Like, everything that the YouTubers have pointed out, I'm just like, yeah, you're fucking right. Like those Juicy Couture suits.
I wonder if Pietro dies outside of the Hex. I would think so too, since he's been seen as dead by her. But I wonder what he is exactly, and I wonder if Agnes is really, if she was
Agatha.
really. No, I wonder if she was really like under a spell when she was waiting where Vision was. I wonder if she's just playing a role.
See, here's what I think.
And that black guy, what's he up to? Because he knows everything.
He knows everything. Here's what I think might happen is that Wanda doesn't know anything about Pietro. So I think she's skeptical, which is why she's asking questions. And I think something might happen where this hex size needs to change. And I think out of the hex, we might be able to see who Pietro is. I think when Pietro has to mix with the outside at some point, if that ever happens,
he'll turn into what he really is.
That's what I think.
Oh, you think she's canvassing a person with his skin?
I think that whatever comes into the hex is some sort of projection from Wanda. And if it's not her doing, it still goes through her filter. So even if
Inception.
So even if he's not, like, she didn't plan for him, maybe there's still like she didn't plan for Rambo to go in.
No.
But she became part of the narrative, right? So maybe Pietro became part of the narrative somehow, but that's the part we don't know.
I think, like, I've been thinking for the past 2 episodes that Agnes is acting as Leonardo DiCaprio, like, I'm your head of security down here.
But also broken.
Yeah. Like, I'm your head of security. So I can talk to you, and don't worry, I know that we're in something that's not real. Like, Agnes is her Leo DiCaprio. 3 layers deep.
Maybe.
I'm calling it.
Maybe. I don't know if
but he's not a real one. He's being an imposter to her real security down there.
But I don't know if they're on the same side.
That's what I'm saying. He's an imposter. He's trying to say, I'm your security down here. Remember?
But really, I'm a spy.
Yes.
For Mephisto.
Yes. That's what I think.
I don't know if she's a spy for Mephisto, but that would be a great plot twist.
She's assisting Mephisto like Loki was assisting Thanos. Fine, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, but then she can't be trusted because Loki can't be trusted.
No, she never could have been trusted.
Now I'm really wondering why they're drawing our attention to her.
That's what I'm saying. She can never be trusted.
I want to know why they put her in the forefront, and there's so many like question marks as to who these characters could be in Wanda's narrative. Like how the hex changes them for her. That's what I want to know. Like, why did Rambo change into who she changed into, and then she became a neighbor, then she became a helper? Like, why did that happen? Because she said something. She's like, you must have known I could help you because you let me take care of your children. So there's some unconscious thing that's going on with Wanda that's causing these people to go into a hex, that when people go into the hex, their narrative supports her in some way, even if she didn't plan for them to be in there. That's
or the children.
Yeah, that's what
For
made
the children.
that's what made me think about it when Monica Rambeau was like, "You must have wanted me to be there because I helped you with your kids." So
For the children. This is all about Mephisto's demon spawns. That's it. And then it opens up all these multiverses, lead into Doctor Strange. Multiverse of Madness.
oh, what I can't wait for also is the Black Panther.
They're not doing it anytime soon now.
No,
Oh, you mean the show?
yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's going to be neat.
yeah.
Seeing how they do shows now, you realize they're going to
Shout
do
out
something
to my sisters and my mom for sharing the Disney Plus login. I
What
can't
I'm
even.
saying?
I'm telling you right now, Disney Plus is
Emma,
it.
you're a star. You're a star, Emma.
Emma, you are a star.
You're a twinkle in my eye.
Thank you, Mom. Because
And clean delay.
WandaVision is hours of fun, even though it's just whatever it is. It's like, oh, and when we found out that it's on West Coast midnight on Fridays,
Yeah.
I was really upset by that.
Yeah, we're not staying up until 3 a.m. to watch WandaVision.
No.
But we might watch it on our lunch break at work.
Yeah. Or at work.
Hey,
It's so good. It's that
TV's
good.
there, desk is there.
I love WandaVision. It's so clever.
hmm
I can't wait. I can't get enough of it. I'm sad. I thought about it the other night. I was like, what's going to happen when it ends?
Hopefully we'll be seeing... So the Black Widow was supposed to be out already by now, and WandaVision was supposed to be like the fourth next step or whatever in the new... in the next phase. So it leads me to believe that whoever they're going to reveal at the end has to be huge, which would mean it would make sense to lead into Doctor Strange, considering it is Doctor Strange in the multiverse of madness. I really do believe it's going to be Doctor Strange at the end, and because the guy who plays Vision, Bethany, what's his name?
I don't know.
Whatever, that British sounding guy, he said he's never gotten to work with Cumberbatch ever, even though they've been in the Endgame movies together. They've never been in a scene at the same time, so they never worked together. So he said he's most looking forward to being able to have worked with this person. So I believe
Benedict Cumberbatch is a good actor.
yes,
He's a really good Doctor Strange, because you're kind of like, oh, what's wrong with you? But at the same time, oh, you're so wise. That's how I feel about him.
I can't wait.
There's so
How many
much.
more episodes are there
Of WandaVision?
Yeah,
I think there might be 3.
that's it.
Yeah.
Oh man,
It's weekly, right? And it I think it ends mid-March or end of March. Or so maybe 3 or 4.
because I heard that the reason why we haven't gotten Black Widow yet outside of theaters is because Scarlett Johansson has a contract that allows her to get a certain amount of the kickback from the theater release. So to stop holding it up, I think from what I heard, they've agreed to amend the contract to make it so Marvel can't be sued by her if they release it through their straight to home method, because they've been afraid of the lawsuit from the actors who were promised kickbacks from a certain type of release. So they couldn't have circumvented that. They wanted to give us the stuff, but they legally could not.
It's pretty lame though, because it's like, well, you want to make that money when?
So I think the public pressure has gotten to
Yeah.
the actors who would be the
They
ones to
have to
give
amend
that
them.
issue to like, yeah, let's just figure it out. Let's figure it out because we need to get this out. And also the fans are going to start hating us, i.e. me, because it's because of me that they won't release it.
Yeah, exactly.
So should be interesting.
Okay, it looks like there are only 8.
And we've seen 6.
Yeah, there's only 2 more.
Are you sure?
Well, look, 7, 8, 1926.
Is that all that they know about?
I don't know.
What the hell?
9 episodes until March 5.
Okay. 3 more.
Oh.
3 more.
I was so sad I should not have Googled that.
Trois autres qui s'en vient. Après ça, that's it. That's all, man.
That show is so good. Oh.
Ouais.
Anyways,
COVID and the Restless.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory why that's the title.
Explanatory.